When talking about the most overpowered cards of all time, I think we have to start with Genetic Apex, and we have to start with Greninja. Greninja is an unbelievably busted card, able to be in decks where it can fight and decks where it simply deals damage from the bench. With Water Shuriken, you're able to deal damage to any of your opponent's cards, whether they're in the active spot or on the bench, and set up ludicrous plays. Also, only 2 energy to deal damage with Mist Slash is pretty solid. 120 HP, not too bad. Any single energy retreat cost. Pretty dang incredible. Also, interestingly enough, both Froakie and Frogadier require a colorless energy to attack, so you could slot that into a lot of decks, and even if you're bricking with your other cards, you can end up fighting. Then, with the addition of Rare Candy, this just became a card that is splashable, funny enough, into just about every deck in the game. Next is Magneton. Magneton, able to power itself with Volt Charge, allows this to be extremely powerful when later Magnezone is released. In Genetic Apex, this card was fine. Now, Magnezone is an insanely good card that can really be in anything, once again, because of its Stage 1 Magneton. So, Magneton and Magnezone, which we'll talk about later, incredibly overpowered cards. Finally, from Genetic Apex, we have the supporter that has stood the test of time, and that is Sabrina. All of the other supporters have had their moments, some of them still relevant in the meta, like Giovanni. Misty is something we can talk about, but Sabrina is still a top tier card, incredibly powerful. It is the other side of the coin to Cyrus, which we will talk about a little later, allowing you to switch your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. Now, your opponent does choose, but in so many situations, moving that card to the bench is extremely powerful, and unlike Cyrus and Repel, it doesn't have any other requirements. Like Cyrus requires you to bring something in that has damage on it, and Repel requires it to be a basic Pokemon. Sabrina, still one of the best cards in Pocket. Before we move on to the next set, I want to give an honorable mention to Misty, a card that is ridiculous and has kind of unfortunately made water decks very high energy cost for a super long time, as well as the original Charizard EX. I think this card is still pretty dang good. However, given how fast the game is right now, it feels like the setup time just doesn't work for it anymore. But 200 damage is still enough to one-shot just about anything in the game outside of some specific circumstances. Moving on to Mythical Island, there actually isn't a lot from Mythical Island that stayed around and been super meta relevant for a very long time, but I do want to highlight Gyarados EX for a moment here. Gyarados EX was an extremely powerful card, and I think there could be some metas where this is still very good. 180 HP on a stage 1 is very considerable, as well as 140 damage from Rampaging Whirlpool. I do think Gary has a shot, but 4 energy is so much in a meta right now that can get things going for 1 or 2 energy. When I look through Mythical Island, really the only card that still is crazy viable is Leaf. Leaf is specific in certain decks. You absolutely need it to move certain Pokemon around. This is one of the only cards from this set that hangs around in the meta anymore. I want to give an honorable mention to things like Mew EX, which is a really cool card, and I do think could find its way back in the meta depending on how your opponent's attacks work. 3 energy to copy anything that they have can be extremely strong. However, with a very quick meta, this loses more and more value. And then, of course, Drudagon. Drud was a whole thing, and you know what? I don't think anybody is missing it. As we move to Space-Time Smackdown, we have to talk about Magnezone. Magnezone, again, incredibly powerful. Yes, it's a Stage 2 Pokemon, but given that its Stage 1 powers itself, this allows Magnezone to be thrown in a ton of different decks, whether they are Lightning or not. 110 damage for 3 energy, pretty solid considering you are putting some of that energy on for free, and then 140 HP is a solid amount of HP to be in that active spot. It's difficult to take this Pokemon down, especially if you can attach a cape to it. Next, our first overpowered fossil to make the list, maybe our only overpowered fossil, and that is Rampardos. Rampardos, if you told me it was an EX Pokemon, I would kind of believe you. 150 HP, a single fighting energy, allows you to deal 130 damage with Head Smash. Yes, there is the drawback that you take 50 damage yourself if you knock your opponent out. If you don't knock your opponent out, there is no drawback at all. This card can pair with so many good things. It's a fossil, so you guarantee the other cards you're starting with. For instance, if you're running another basic like Silvally, you're guaranteeing that you're getting that because you cannot guarantee a first-hand fossil. incredibly good. I don't even know what an EX Rampardos would look like. That's how good Rampardos is. Next is Darkrai. Darkrai EX is unbelievably strong. Nightmare Aura, allowing you to do chip damage to your opponents every time you are powering this up with energy. Darkrai found some success during Space-Time Smackdown, and even more as time has gone on because it pairs so well with so many different cards. One specifically we will talk about later, but Darkrai, insanely good, a basic which is really, really nice, and that consistent damage sets up some pretty amazing plays. Next, let's talk about a couple Pokemon tools that are very good and have stood the test of time as well, and that is going to be Giant Cape and Rocky Helm. Two very different items. Rocky Helm essentially making anything Druddigon, right? Giving you the ability to deal damage to your opponents when they deal damage to you in that active spot with a direct attack. This is really strong, and it sets up some pretty amazing breakpoints. And then Giant Cape, 20 additional HP to your Pokemon. This is such an important item. It's really hard to imagine or remember the meta before items like this. Cape just sets up so many breakpoints that are very, very important. Obviously, a Pokemon is at maximum use as long as it is on the battlefield with energy on it. So if a Pokemon has 10 HP left or 20 HP left because of a Giant Cape, that's incredible. Or, you know, the flip side with Rocky Helm, if you're able to get that extra 20 damage if your opponent attacks you, that can be the difference maker between them getting KO'd or not. Next, maybe the most overpowered supporter in the game, and that is Cyrus. Cyrus is insane. It is one of the best cards. It is a checkmate card. It ends games. It is absolutely unbelievable, allowing you to switch in a benched Pokemon to the active spot that has damage on it. Cyrus is the #1 card that you will play and see an instant concede from your opponents. Without question, Space-Time Smackdown brought some crazy good cards into the meta. A few honorable mentions, because I think there are some really good cards here. I think Pokemon Communications, very, very solid. However, now with more ways to go through your deck, I don't know if this is as relevant, but still a very good card. We have Shaman, the Grass Shaman, able to heal. This finds its way into a lot of decks in some sneaky ways. With the meta being quick right now, I don't know if it has as much value as it once did. I also, of course, have to talk about Manaphy. Manaphy was a very good card for a long time that came out from Space-Time Smackdown. I don't know if we're going to see a Manaphy meta anytime soon. However, we also have Mars and Dawn. Mars is probably more meta relevant than Dawn right now, but both cards in specific decks are very good. Mars, extremely good in certain situations currently, because if you are able to disrupt your opponent's hand and stop them from playing something with rare candy, it can be the difference between winning the match or not. Next, let's move on to Triumphant Light. Triumphant Light has probably one card that is going to stand the test of time, maybe a couple, and then a few honorable mentions here. I think we have to start by talking about Arceus EX. Not only does Arceus have the amazing Link ability where a lot of different Pokemon work with it, you think of things like Carnivine and Crobat that become better and better when Arceus or Arceus EX are on the board. Those Pokemon also cannot be affected by special conditions, which is pretty amazing. So if it runs into a poison deck or runs into burn or sleep or anything like that, it is completely immune in the active spot to that. Then, of course, it has its ability, Ultimate Force, its attack, that is able to do 130 damage if you have a full bench, which is really, really powerful. Arceus is an incredibly good card, and I think can find its way into many different metas. Some honorable mentions from this set. I do believe Irida is an extremely good card. Even though water is struggling a lot right now, there is absolutely a reason to run this in many, many water decks. We also have a card like Barry, which is a really good supporter for a very specific deck. Of course, it works with Staraptor and Heracross, but you will most likely see it with the Snorlax that came out in Triumphant Light, able to do 100 damage for only 2 energy with Collapse. Pretty dang strong, and in my opinion, better than Snorlax EX. From Shining Revelry, we have a few really cool cards, some that are in and out of the meta. One I want to talk about is Charizard EX from this set. So Charizard EX from this set didn't initially pop. It had its moments. Stoke Zard's not bad, but it still required you to get a stage 2 online, which could be difficult to do in certain moments. However, that does quickly change, which we will talk about soon. Steam Artillery, a really solid attack that does 150 damage, and essentially you only need 2 energy for Charizard, right? The 1 energy that you put onto Stoke, and then the additional energy the following turn, so you can attack with Steam Artillery. 150 damage for 2 energy, right, is really, really powerful. Next in this set, we have Meowscarada. The whole Meowscarada line is pretty incredible, but Sprigatito able to cry for help, pull grass cards from your deck into your hand, and then Meowscarada able to do serious damage to EX Pokemon. 60 damage for 2 energy isn't too bad already, but it does an additional 70 if they're an EX Pokemon. You add to the fact that this has 140 HP, you add to the fact that there are things like Leaf Cape. I mean, Meowscarada is a really good card, and I do think we could see the cat pop back up soon. Next, we have to talk about Giratina EX. One of the best EXs to ever release in the entire game. Maybe the best EX card. I mean, it's so unbelievably powerful. Broken Space Bellow allows you to attach Psychic Energy from your energy zone once per turn. This does end your turn, but getting this card on stage 1, a turn where you can't draw energy, gives you a massive advantage. And there's so many decks that play around this card setting itself up on the bench, while you also set up another powerful threat on the board. Something like Darkrai obviously pairs super well. When you're powering Darkrai, you're chipping at your opponents, then you're powering Giratina, because it's not like you're attacking when you're doing that. Just an unbelievably powerful card. Giratina EX really puts the other Giratina to shame, for sure. Some honorable mentions from this set. Pokemon Center Lady, still a very, very good card. Not only able to heal 30 damage from your Pokemon, but also cure status conditions, which can be very valuable. And Red, a really good card, able to do an additional 20 damage to your opponent's active EX Pokemon. This card obviously ebbs and flows depending on how many EX Pokemon are super valuable in the meta, but that extra 20 damage can be the difference maker between a KO or not. And the final honorable mention, Shinies. We all love these shiny cards. I do think the shiny cards are really, really cool, but there have been some situations where you pull a shiny in a God pack and you think, oh man, this could have been anything else. But it's not. It's a shiny. Moving on to Celestial Guardians, we have Solgaleo EX, the best EX in this set. It is unbelievably strong, 2 energy to do 120 damage, and then at the same time, you are able to enter the active spot for free, essentially making Leaf like such a less useful card, like Leaf, X Speed, stuff like that. Solgaleo cares not for any of these. Solgaleo is unbelievable, pretty dang strong when it was released, and I feel like it's one of those cards that will always be a possibility in the meta. 2 energy for 120 is crazy good. A fire Pokemon that actually has brought its way into the meta that isn't Charizard is Incineroar EX. Pretty dang strong, and the nice thing about Incineroar is kind of like Stoke Zard is you are able to fight with this card for very, very little energy. If you can get from Litten to Incineroar super quickly, a single energy will allow you to attack your opponents and burn them. The nice thing about that burn too, when a card like Oricorio exists, it's pretty amazing that Incineroar EX can actually deal with it, whereas many cards cannot deal with Oricorio. And yes, we will talk about Oricorio. I should also mention with Incineroar, 180 HP is super solid, and if it has any damage on it, it's swinging for 140 for 3 energy. Plus, it recently got a buff with How being added to the game, the supporter that allows it to do more damage. So I think Incineroar is just a really solid card in a type where I feel like you don't see a lot of decks outside of Charizard. Next, of course, Dhelmise, 140 HP with 3 energy to do 80 damage. I don't know, this card's so sad. I had to include it. Sorry, Dhelmise. I love you, but what are we doing with Dhelmise EX? All right, moving on. This, of course, was the set where the Lightning Oricorio was introduced with the ability Safeguard. EX Pokemon cannot do damage to this Pokemon with their attacks. I mean, what a meta-shaking card. I absolutely love its addition to the game. I think it made deck building so much more interesting. So big shoutouts to Oricorio. All of your decks should have some answer to Oricorio, even if that is the concede button. Next, an item card, probably the most impactful card in the entire set. Of course, that is Rare Candy. Rare Candy is a fully game-changing card, allowing you to take a basic Pokemon and turn it into a stage 2 without needing your stage 1. This setup so many different strategies in the game, and it moved us away from a meta that was heavily focused on just EXs that were basic Pokemon, and now you see so many decks that have stage 2 EXs. Stage 1s at this point feel like they're completely left in the dust compared to stage 2 EX Pokemon and basic EX Pokemon. Rare Candy is just insane. Like, what a game-changing item. Another really powerful supporter from this set is Lily, allowing you to heal a stage 2 Pokemon for 60 HP. It's always tricky to find what the actual breakpoint is where the heals will matter, right? Because if you're able to heal a Pokemon 20, sometimes that will give you another turn. Other times 20 is irrelevant. But 60 is extremely relevant in so many situations, allowing your very powerful stage 2 Pokemon to survive an extra round, and an extra round could be the game-winning amount of time. So many honorable mentions in this set. I feel like you could talk about both Pokemon tools here. They're really, really good. Poison Barb and Leaf Cape. Almost any of the tools added to the game have been very, very powerful. Not all of them, sorry Lumberry, but a lot of them have been very powerful. We also should talk about Guzma, a really strong supporter, allowing you to remove tool cards attached to your opponents. However, it does feel like this card, like many cards that are kind of similar to this that are very specific, right? This card will get more value or less value depending on how relevant tools are in the meta. I've actually found the current meta, it doesn't feel like tools are as relevant as they were a couple sets ago, so I do think Guzma is not as powerful as it used to be. Ilima is another supporter that I think will continue to ebb and flow in value just depending on how powerful a colorless card is. Right now I don't think it's the absolute best, but this works really well with like Snorlax, Arceus, things like that. And I have to shout out Kiawe and Turtonator. While this is not one of the most broken setups in the game, it is actually an extremely powerful fire setup, able to give 2 energy to Turtonator, and then of course it does end your turn right away. But if you can get this on turn 1 with Turt, 2 fire energy, and then you start swinging for 90 damage the following turn, you're in amazing shape. As we head to Extra Dimensional Crisis, I think we should start with Shiinotic, a card that is pretty dang good and could continue to see play. I do wonder, however, if Sylveon has kind of made this less and less relevant. The ability Illuminate to put a random Pokemon from your deck into your hand is pretty incredible. So incredible that somehow Shiinotic Solgaleo became like such a meta staple just because you were able to dig through your deck and get everything you need to make a hand work. There are other decks with this right now, like Shiinotic Magnezone is having a time, like 2 cards that can kind of be mashed together. I think this will be one of those cards that will be relevant in the meta for a very long time. Next, we have to talk about the supporter Looker, with the incredibly powerful ability to look at your opponent's supporter cards. Wow. What a card. Jeez, they don't make them like this anymore. Thank God. A Pokemon tool that came from this set that I think could be around for a long time is the Electrical Cord. This is a staple in most all Lightning decks right now. Just the ability to keep the energy that you have generated around is extremely valuable and extremely powerful. There are also some honorable mentions from this set. I think the Ultra Beasts in general are quite good. I think the way Lusamine interacts with them is pretty amazing. Celesteela probably being the most impactful Ultra Beast from the set. However, I do think cards like Guzzlord and Nihilego are still very relevant in many decks. Overall, I think Extra Dimensional Crisis still has a lot of meta relevant cards. However, they're kind of like dependent on each other, so I don't think that's bad at all. I just think that's something that should be noted. Celesteela, pretty amazing. Guzzlord, Nihilego, still definitely a relevant deck. Even Buzzwole still having its time in the sun. But I don't think you could talk about Extra Dimensional Crisis without talking about Silvally, which is probably the best card that was released in the set. Just unbelievably strong. Silvally, Type Null, and Gladion all together, setting up some ludicrously powerful combinations. Silvally, 110 HP as a stage 1 card, able to do 100 damage if all you do is play a supporter. That's so unbelievably strong. For reference, Dhelmise required 3 energy to do 80 damage. Silvally does 100 damage for 2 energy, and it's not an EX Pokemon, so take that, Dhelmise. Next, let's talk about Eevee Grove. Eevee Grove has given us one of the most powerful cards in the game, it feels like, with Sylveon EX. The ability to not only like comb through your deck with other options in the game, but also to have a card that the moment you play it, you draw an additional 2 cards is phenomenally good. We all thought this card could be really, really good, and oh boy, it is. Sylveon is incredible, and it could be in just about any deck until the end of time, unless something draws even better or more consistently. It's just so dang good. I think a couple of honorable mentions from this set. Flareon EX is a very strong card, able to power itself with discarded fire energy and do a considerable amount of damage with its attack. Very, very solid, as well as Eevee EX. Eevee EX just allows you to play Eevee decks with more than 2 Eeveelutions in it, which allows things like Sylveon to be put into an Eevee deck, and it also allows you to create some really interesting combinations like the Flareon Leafeon deck that we played on stream a little while back, which is crazy fun and just such a wild combination that could not be possible without Eevee EX. Another couple honorable mentions from this set. How, able to do additional damage with Primarina, Incineroar, and Decidueye EX could be a very, very cool card. Feels like it's very centered around an Incineroar deck. And then, of course, we have Eevee Bag. Eevee Bag will be relevant as long as Eevees are relevant, and I think this game will be releasing different EX Eeveelutions for a very long time. Let me know which overpowered card I missed in the comments.